to our guests. I'd like to now call the meeting to order. And as we do each meeting, I would like to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. And I think this is especially important today when we're acknowledging missing and murdered Indigenous women on Wear Red Day. So we're all set to go with a motion to approve the minutes. You've received the minutes, and I would call for a motion to either amend them or to receive them and approve them as circulated.
I move the minutes of April 7th.
Okay, moved by Lisa. Could I have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Iona. All those in favor indicate by saying aye or waving your hand, or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. You have the agenda in front of you, the order of business. Are there any additions that people would like or changes for that agenda? There being none, then I ask for a motion to accept the agenda as circulated.
Make a motion.
Moved by Christine.
Second.
Seconded by Lisa. All those in favor indicate by saying aye or waving your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and motion is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? I'm not aware of any, but just checking. I don't believe there is any. Conflict of interest. Are there any people, any members of the committee who wish to declare a conflict of interest now, having seen the agenda? There being none, we'll move on. How about, as far as I know, there are no motions of rescission. There is no deferred business to consider. And just check with Katie, our clerk, is there any correspondence, petitions, or delegations that we should be considering?
There are no correspondence at this time, and there are also no petitions at this time.
All right. Thank you, Katie. And there are no information items being brought forward, so that takes us right to our first presentation. And so now I would like to turn the agenda over to our municipal clerk, pardon me, Mr. Ian McLean, and Tracy Jones-Grant, who's no stranger to us, who's the Managing Director of Diversity and Inclusion. So Tracy and Ian will give you about 15 minutes. How's that?
Ian, are you there? There you be.
Hello, everyone. I want to first off and say thank you for having me at your meeting. I know you have a busy agenda and a lot of important business to get to. So I wanted to just first off start off by saying thank you so much for having me here. This is important work, and looking forward to providing a little bit of information and answering some questions. Tracy, did you have anything that you wanted to touch on before I give a very brief presentation?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Ian.
So, Chair, if it is okay, I do have a very quick presentation and then have an opportunity for some questions at the end. So as I said, first and foremost, thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the ability to come and be a part of your meeting for a short period of time. I take that very seriously, and I appreciate that you're willing to have me here to talk about some of our border recruitment strategies. And then also wanting to listen to some feedback and listen to the questions that are asked today, so that we can look at our processes and look at how we're doing recruitment, and also identify some of the opportunities that we have for recruitment, and making sure that we can see those opportunities for what they are, of trying to find a way to accomplish what we're all looking for, which is proper, appropriate, diverse representatives on the board and committees within the HRM. So if we could go to the next slide. So I will start off by just going very, very high level about what a border committee is. This is something that is very important for the HRM and is very topical right now. We are in the middle of a district boundary review that looks at the governance of the organization, that is looking at committees, committee structures, and how they work. We also have some legislation that has changed committees within the organization that we're still incorporating into our best practices and are finding the effects of what they'll mean for our important committees that we have. Municipal boards and committees are representatives that provide advice, recommendations to regional council, community councils, or standing committees on certain matters. That is an interesting statement to make, because when you look at our committees, they are very, very individual. They have different terms of reference, different powers, different authorities, and they are very unique and specific to that committee. Each one of our committees has a special area of focus, a unique terms of reference, and the composition of those committees change depending on what committees they are. Some of our committees have very specific requirements for what regional council has indicated they are looking for, including professional designations. We also have other committees that are looking for specific levels of diversity and specific areas of diversity that we are trying to provide to them. All of our committee recruitments have a diversity component to them, and that is what we're here to discuss today. Next slide, please. So we have committees, and now people often ask, well, how do you get on a committee? How are you appointed, and what does that process look like? I know the individuals in this room here will have an idea, but I want to give a quick understanding of what process we follow. So appointment to HRM committees is important, and we are looking at opportunities and want to be able to reflect diversity, provide stakeholder representation, provide specific skill sets and expertise to our committees, bring and representation from groups and service users, and also, and most importantly, acknowledging that these are volunteers that are bringing some profile of service to these committees. When making these appointments, regional council recognize the municipality is served by boards and committees who represent the communities they represent and are reflective of the communities they represent. Twice a year, in the spring and the fall, the clerk's office holds a recruitment campaign to look at different community volunteers for these committees. Some of these recruitment efforts may be multiple committees and may have many, many different committees that we are trying to recruit for, and some committee cycles are a bit smaller. We also do specific recruitments throughout the year for committees that form, and targeted recruitments for some committees that have very specific skill sets or professional designations that they are looking for. Those often provide the most challenges for us to find, because we need to find people that are willing to put their names forward for all committees. And the more limitations we put on the membership of those committees, the harder it is to find people to serve. Next slide, please. So how do we recruit for the new members? So our office, the municipal clerk's office, our colleagues in corporate communications, human resources, and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion do our best to collaborate to develop a recruitment strategy to allow for that effective representation on boards and committees. The focus of the strategy is to encourage applications from diverse audience, promote and educate our community on municipal boards and committees, and also provide an opportunity to answer and provide clarification to questions that come during the application process. We work with our colleagues in communications to try to implement and develop a strategic communications plan to be able to find recruits for our committees. I do want to touch on what this actually means in practice, not just saying that we collaborate, because I find that often we say we collaborate and nobody goes any farther than that, and that may not give enough information. So when I say collaborate, what we are attempting to do in our office is reach out to our colleagues who have the relationships, have the expertise, and have the contacts that will be able to reach the most amount of people that may be interested in serving on these committees. We work with Tracy and her team to fan out and provide these applications to areas that our office may not be aware of, and really lean on the expertise and the professionalism from the people in that important office when we're doing these recruitment efforts. I do want to take the time to publicly thank Tracy and her team for these efforts and the work that they do. We lean on them more than probably anybody realized in these recruitment efforts, and we are doing our best to try to provide the most wide-ranging slate of candidates we can for our recruitment efforts. Next slide, please. I will not read this slide in every word, but we wanted to give an example of our community engagement that we attempt to do when we are promoting opportunities to serve on these important boards. We do send out a series of public service announcements, online campaigns, more traditional print mediums that will allow us to go into the community newspapers and really try to reach people in their homes when the newspaper gets delivered for those who still have it delivered. Social media campaigns, email campaigns. We do look at different videos that are put out in the ferry terminals and transit terminals, as well as libraries. And I would offer that probably the most effective tool that we have is the community and is the people that are in this committee and the people that we engage with and serve on our committees. Word of mouth, talking to other people who may be interested, and then being able to provide an opportunity for people who serve on committees to answer questions for those who may want to, has been shown to be a very effective tool to get very engaged members of our community to serve on these important boards. Next slide, please. In 2021, the municipal clerk's office again worked hand in hand, or attempted to be hand in hand with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to address and update the application process for board and committees to include an optional diversity survey in applications. I do want to point out a couple of things with this, that this is optional. We do not make it mandatory for anybody to identify any of the diversity indicators that we give the opportunity for, but everyone does have the opportunity to provide this information. This is provided when the shortlisting of applicants is done and is brought forward with to give the diversity lens for the applicants who put their names forward to serve on board and committees. This is new. This has been done for, I would say, 1.5 recruitment cycles in full. In the fall, we were able to see our full-fledged responses to this, and we are working on any form of improvements or anything we can do to try to get important information in this optional diversity survey. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we are working and doing our best to try to provide this information in a proactive but also responsive way. We want to give it to individuals who may be interested to serve on these committees early, because it is an extensive time commitment. And we recognize that it may take some time for people to put applications in and ask the questions of the boards that they want to serve on, they may want to serve on. We are looking and are here to listen and provide as much information as we can on what we can do to get the call for residents to serve on these important bodies out into our communities. We rely on our colleagues within the HRM, and importantly, the partners that we have who serve on these committees and have already put their names forward to serve as citizen volunteers. Thank you for putting your name forward and being willing to serve on this committee. That is appreciated, and it is providing important feedback and work for the work of the HRM. We look forward to listening and learning from you, and also trying to implement any changes or things that we can do to try to get the applications for boards and committees as wide-ranging and as broad as possible for the HRM. And with that, our last slide is just the question slide. So if there is anything, I am here to answer any questions or to provide any more information. And we do have our contact points as well for anybody who is interested with more specific questions.
And if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So as Ian has pointed out, we do work quite closely with the clerk's office on recruitment. Pardon me. For the first recruitment of the Women's Advisory Committee, I was involved from the very first minute we sent out the applications to the report that went to council with our recommendations for names. So again, because we've been looking at how are we trying to get more diverse representation on all of our committees, we did start to include the self-identification piece. And as Ian said, it is voluntary, but it is helping us to see, are we getting more diverse people applying and becoming active in municipal government? So, you know, we don't want to sort of have all the diverse people on the accessibility or the women's or the youth committees. We really want to see people on our transportation committees, our community committees, all of those things. So we are really trying to work on that. One thing Ian didn't mention was the look of our recruitment campaign has changed considerably in the past few years. So I had the opportunity to work with the clerk's office, myself and team members, to work with the clerk's office to say, you know, even your recruitment materials need to be more diverse and more inclusive. And we came up with some really great stuff, especially in the last municipal election, that was far more representative of the wider community that we're trying to draw on these boards and committees. So we just wanted to kind of share with you the process and how we're going out, and the voices that are on there. The one thing that Ian didn't say that I think is important is the clerk's office has the opportunity to make recommendations to council as to who sits on a committee. Council then has the opportunity to make the final decision. So we might put forward a few names and then you know, bios and all the relevant and pertinent information. And then council receives that, and in camera, they have the opportunity to discuss membership, because it's almost like a personnel issue. You wouldn't talk about this in a public council meeting or committee of the whole meeting. It is a personnel thing, so it's discussed in camera. They make a decision, those people are notified, and then should they agree, they get appointed to the committee that they've selected. So thank you. Oh, we made it with 2 minutes to spare.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy and Ian. Thank you very much. So we've got an opportunity to ask some questions. Ian, just for your information, I usually follow a process of going around the table by last name alphabetically. I would normally start with Haneen, but she sent me a message. She's having trouble getting in, some technology issues. So hopefully she will join us later. Lily, a member of our committee, has sent regrets. And that brings us to Lisa, Councillor Blackburn. Do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Ian. That was fantastic. And I know, Tracy, how hard you worked on this committee from, like you said, day one. And I'm just wondering if maybe you could discuss a bit the challenges that you're having now with reaching the people where they are. You know, back in the day, an ad in the newspaper a couple of times a week would pretty much, you know, seal the deal, and maybe a public service announcement on radio. But now it is so much more difficult to reach the audience we want to reach. And, you know, just wondering if you guys are foreseeing any future work in, you know, looking at how it's advertised and you know, what needs to be done to reach the people where they are. Thanks.
This is the fun of virtual meetings, as Tracy and I are going to guess who's going to start answering the questions, and then we'll have to clarify for each other. It's part of the fun. Councillor Blackburn, through the chair, it is changing on an hourly basis, I would say, more than a daily basis. As my children tell me, I already don't know how to reach them where they are, and we're trying to listen, and we are trying to listen to the response of the people that we are trying to contact. I do hope Tracy is okay. Tracy's team does an amazing job of engaging us with their connections. This is an important piece that I want to really try to put some emphasis on. The relationships that are built, the relationships that exist between many of our colleagues in the organization and those community groups are what we are looking at really acknowledging and tapping into for some of the diversity of going where people are. Because our office, as much as we will do our best, we will be more successful if we work with Tracy and her team on those relationships. As far as the mediums, as we are putting out the call for applications, we've seen a significant change in that through COVID as well, where people are receiving information in different mediums and in different ways, and our meetings are occurring differently. So we're hearing feedback from people of saying, well, maybe I can, if I have more flexibility of how we meet, it might be more possible for people to meet on committees. So we are in a global transition period for where information is received, and we are trying to stay at the top of that. but we are critically importantly trying to work with our community liaisons and working with the people that we have in the community to make sure that we are asking where to go, not just assuming where we should go. Tracy, I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Councillor Blackburn, the other thing is that COVID impacted some of the D&I offices' work.
Yeah.
So traditionally, we would have done community circles so that we could be in community and explain, here's what it means to sit on a board. Here's the time commitment. Here's what might be expected of you. You know, these are the types of questions or issues or things that you might be asked to provide input on. COVID really impacted that. So those were what we called in our office our community circles program. We're coming out of COVID. We're learning to live with COVID. So we're getting back to some of that. We've been doing it around employment, and it's unbelievable. We've been able to now actually track at least the number of diverse people who are applying now in HRM. Doesn't always necessarily transfer into hiring, but at least we know people are learning about the organization and are willing to apply. This is the same thing we need to do with boards and commissions. People need to know how to apply. But the other thing that I think is really important in our work is they need to feel safe. And I've said this a few times. I don't know if I've said it at this table, but it's very difficult to be the lone voice. So if I'm the only Black woman on the Transportation Advisory Committee, I might muzzle myself. The committee might not be doing it to me, but I might feel like I have to temper my voice, or I may not be heard, or I might be shut down. So we've also got to build in our community that sense of voice. Your voice is valued. You do have a voice. Yes, it's difficult being the only one, but there are other supports to help you amplify your voice. So there's still more work about empowering people on committees and getting people to join committees.
And what's good too about, as we move forward, thinking about a hybrid hybrid meetings, that certainly I think is appealing to attract more women who may be challenged with childcare, elder care, that sort of thing. And I'm, certainly trying to push boards and committees as an excellent way to take public service for a test drive for women that are thinking about running for public office. So that's great. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Lisa. Tanya, Holly, what comments or questions do you have?
Thank you for the presentation. And I love what you just said, Councillor Blackburn, about it being an opportunity for folks to get a taste of municipal or governance or other opportunities. And I think, HRM has done a great job of sort of identifying multiple entry points for people, and committees and boards being one of it. I guess a question around, in the short term or the near future, what are some of the policies or practices or procedures? We talked about virtual meetings, but that the municipality is looking at to try to encourage participation. So I think of, the systematic barriers of even, getting to a meeting or arranging childcare, or, for some families, it might be like juggling, feeding your family while you're trying to make time for a meeting. For the people that once they get to the door, how do we keep them engaged and reduce the barriers to participation from a policy and an ongoing procedures perspective? And then my other question is how do we celebrate and continue to engage in this work so we can cultivate champions all around? So.
Thank you for the question. So I'll deal with the policy question first. I think Councillor Blackburn acknowledged this earlier. We are in a transition period where meeting types that were not allowed 2 years ago are being employed on a daily basis. Virtual meetings were not allowed before the pandemic hit. So we are attempting to pivot, and the pivoting that we are doing will be happening over the course of years. It will take time to be able to build the infrastructure and the technology that we need to be able to offer a hybrid or a blended meeting solution. And there's some incredibly important policy work that has to happen with that. Our Administrative Order 1, which sets the proceedings for meetings, will have to reflect how virtual meetings can occur. There's a lot of work that is being done to make that fundamental basis of what we are operating with for the governance of the organization be reflected in policy and have a strategic application to it. The policy work that is happening in conjunction with that, in 2019, at the very beginning of 2020, there was a significant amount of work that was done on a rewrite and a refresh for the HRM's public appointment policy. That has received a very firm pause when we hit the pandemic. As we are moving forward, this is moving forward and will be reprioritized. And we are hoping to have resources to look at the public appointment policy so we can do a refresh of that. A number of the engagement actions that were done on that policy are very, very good, but will need to get some additional information and more engagement based on the learnings of the last 2 years. So we are incredibly excited to work on that. And as we work at building a group to do the review of that policy, we will be looking at it through the diversity and inclusion lens, and we're excited to have this work move forward.
Thank you.
Hi, Jen, I see you on mute.
Councillor Stoddard, we'll move on to you. Thank you, Ian, for that response, by the way.
Thank you, Ian and Tracy, for the presentation. I can remember before I joined civil service or had anything to do with public, public involvement, civil service, I applied for the Heritage Committee. And I was just like, well, I like the older buildings, I like this. And I never expected to actually be accepted. So it was like, wow, and I enjoyed it because I went from a member to vice chair to chair. Like things happened, somebody left and it just kind of, so I was sitting there, I was like, okay, I started 8 months ago and now I'm the chair. What do I do? But it was a good experience. And when it was over, I was sad to see it end. The only issue I had was the meetings were at 4 o'clock and I couldn't always get off at 4. So sometimes I had to work my lunch or try to do something that way. And when I did become a counselor and they gave us options of what groups and committees we wanted to be on, and guess what I picked? Heritage. So, it turned out to be something I enjoyed to something I just carried on when I was a counselor. So yeah, it was a really good experience. Looking back, I know there was a time when visible minorities would not fill out that checklist saying, I am, because they had a feeling that they'd be, what can I say? They'd be earmarked and not chosen. I mean, this was years ago. How do you feel it's going now? That are there more people identifying?
Councillor Stoddard, thank you for the question. I would offer that I think there needs to be more time and more data compiled before I can give you a response that I am comfortable with on that. Okay. This is a new system. I would offer that this will probably be something that we will adjust and change as we have lessons learned from different recruiting strategies. We saw in the fall 2021 recruitment, a number of people who put the diversity information on that survey.
Nice.
We also saw a number who didn't. And I don't know the reasons why. And we want to look at how we communicate the why and how we communicate what the purpose of this information is for. And I think that it's I think that an important communications tool is being comfortable with empowering people with the why things are occurring, because that will the intent behind it is to reduce the anxiety of what the information is used for. It is being used to inform the people who decide on who is being appointed to these committees, to make sure we can fulfill the requirements that we have for the applicants. And we want to make sure that we know that people are entrusting us with their important personal information, and it's our responsibility to communicate the why and the protection of that.
So I know with these answers about diversity, it helps you, blend your committee. So if you don't know, you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think, like I said, it happened years ago. And I don't know how it's happening now, but like you said, it's a work in progress. But there used to be that stigma, don't identify because you won't get the position or you won't get the job. So yeah, I'm glad to see that it's being worked on.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I'm getting a little bit concerned about time, but we want to have question opportunities for both Christine and Haneen, who's now joined us. So Christine, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, thank you, Ian and Tracy, for the presentation. Especially Tracy, I know how hard your team work on the diversity and inclusion pieces. And just following up on my presentation from last committee meeting, I'm curious. Ian pointed out earlier for the diversity survey, and sometimes you don't get everyone to self-identify. So I'm wondering, do we have the data, or do we track the number of what's the representation of women, what's the representation of racialized people on the municipal ABC? So every year there's a benchmark we can compare. And also when Tracy, the team, they reaching out to the community, they can be more targeted to certain group of communities. So I'm curious of this.
Thank you for the question. I would say that part of the response is going to be similar to my last response of saying this is very new. And so the data comparables and trying to get very good, we want to have solid data to compare, and we want to have a repeatable process so that the data can be compared from year to year. So we had the fall recruitment in 2021. And if I can give you a bit of an indication, we will be finalizing the appointments to those committees here within the next few weeks. So it is an extensive process. And since that period of time, we've done a spring recruitment. So that will finish up over the next, it is very much a cyclical project. One of our debrief components of that will be compiling the statistics to do comparators from recruitment cycle to recruitment cycle. The difficulty for that is we have to report that, and we will be reporting it based on a percentage, not based on a number. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but we might have some recruitment cycles where we're recruiting for 100 positions, or we might have some recruitment cycles where we're recruiting for 10. So we're actively looking at trying to blend that and try to have a more consistent recruitment cycle. We're having a similar number of positions that we're recruiting for. But the stats that you're talking about, we are going to be able to pull them together and do a comparative from year to year, and not just on gender diversity, but there's also a number of different demographic breakdowns that we'll be able to report on. We just need to have a little bit of more comparable years to be able to see what the trends would be on that.
Thank you, Ian. I'm wondering, will that number be internal? Will it be public?
I can follow up with the committee on that question. I won't be able to give you a specific response to that. I need to confirm that we will not be having any issues with personal privacy when we put that forward. I would hope the number would be public, and we would look at trying to make everything public we can public.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Haneen, did you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I apologize for missing the presentation. Unfortunately, tech has been a horrible thing for me today. I did have a small question after reviewing the presentation slides that were sent over. With this you know, the 50-30 challenge and with everything that's been the mandate that you're trying to sort of achieve, there's often this stereotype that comes along when people of color and, you know, women come into play and we're trying to sort of equalize things, where it's often considered that they only get a seat on the table or whatever it may be because they are from this certain walk of life or this certain gender. And I am wondering if there's any sort of proactive measures that may come into play here, especially in this within the municipal purview and your recruitment process.
Thank you for the question. So I can go over our recruitment process again if that would be needed. When we do the recruitment process, we are doing everything we can to engage with our colleagues within the organization and within the community to do that proactive approach, to go and meet people where they are, not providing information and expecting people to find it. That's the mentality we attempt to reach this with and approach this with. The part that is the most realistic, we can't force people to apply. This is not something that we can say we're going to pause recruitment until we get a specific number of people from a certain group, whether that be groups that we are recruiting engineers for, or whether that be any of our groups where the diversity lens must be applied. There's multiple factors for it. I guess the most important tone that I want to have this conversation with is we are trying to be proactive, but we're also trying to be responsive. If there are areas or elements or opportunities that we are missing for promotion, it's not intentional. And if we are aware of them, we will do everything that is budgetarily and resourcefully possible to go and try to accomplish exactly what you're suggesting. We are looking to be proactive and go to people, not expect them to come to us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian and Tracy. I think our time is kind of pressing in on us. So if I could just comment, I would say that I'm grateful that you're here and that you've had this conversation, and I'm hoping that more people than us are going to hear this conversation, because I think that's just one more means of spreading the word about applying to committees and boards. And the second thing my takeaway is that we need to encourage people when they do apply, not to be afraid to indicate the sort of characteristics that make them a little bit unique or representative of diverse communities, that not to be afraid to share that information. We encourage them to share that information so we can gather that data and so that we can understand whether or not our committees and boards are truly diverse. Because as you said at the beginning, if people don't share the information, we do not have the data. So thank you again. I hope this has been a good use of your time, certainly been a good use of our time as far as I'm concerned. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and by all means, if there's other questions that develop, our office can be contacted, and really appreciate the partnership and the collaboration, and looking forward to. I do watch more of your meetings than you realize, probably. So,
well, and I hope others are watching today too, especially for this topic. All right, thanks again, Tracy. So we'll move right along now to the next agenda item, which is going to be led by Caroline and Amy and some of their colleagues. So Caroline and Amy were thinking, hopefully we can do this within about an hour, maybe less if you can. And I'll turn the agenda over to you. It's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We really appreciate having 60 minutes on your 2-hour agenda. We're really grateful for this time and excited to tell you a little bit about the Women and Gender Equity Strategy, but more importantly, we're looking forward to having a conversation with you about what you think we can do for this strategy. So I'm just going to ask the clerk about a technical question. Is it okay, Katie, for me to share my screen with the PowerPoint, or is that something that you'll be doing?
Yep, I can do that. I'm just going to promote you to a co-host here.
Okay, thank you. And while we sort that out, I just want to introduce my colleagues. I'm joined by Amy Brierly, as well as Bailey Brown and Kathy Collett today. and they're going to be co-facilitating with me.
And you should be good there to share your screen.
Okay, just bear with me for one moment. Katie, I don't think we have full permission, so I'm just going to send it to you via email, and I'll start off with some housekeeping stuff while we do that. Just give me a second.
If you like, we can get our team to share it. We can also walk you through the process really quickly on making sure you have all the abilities to share.
I don't have full permission. I can only share my full screen. So just
I'm sending it to Katie Campbell, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's great. We'll work with this. This is good.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. It's not a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting without some technical difficulties. All right, so if you could go to the next slide, please, that would be great. Okay, before we begin, and this is the housekeeping component, I know the committee is familiar with being recorded, and that's part of the process, but we just want to make sure to cover off the access and privacy component of this. So the meeting will be recorded as it usually is, but our team will also be taking notes as a record for our women and gender equity strategy. So we'll be using those notes to review what you said and told us, and to include it as part of our proceedings for the strategy development. So I just wanted to gain your consent, make sure you're okay with that. And so if you're not, we'd invite you to exit the meeting. But that doesn't mean you can't provide feedback. You could certainly send a written submission to me via email, or certainly via the clerks as well. So I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable before we move forward. And you could also just put a thumbs up. That always works too. Okay, all right. I don't think anyone's left, and I think we're good to go. All right, next slide, please. All right, I'm going to hand it to my colleague, Amy.
Thanks, Caroline. And I have two screens here. So if you folks see me looking over here, it's because I'm looking at my other screen. But as Jane started us off, as usual, with our land acknowledgement at the beginning of the meeting, but we also wanted to re-ground ourselves in the fact that we are located in Mi'kmaq, and that this is the unceded present day and ancestral lands of the Mi'kmaq people. We wanted to have this at the start of our conversation today because, one of the threads that has been going through each of our conversations around the women and gender equity strategy is the need for us to be looking at our obligation as treaty people in the peace and friendship treaties, and how this women and gender equity strategy can advance that work and can advance supporting Indigenous women and gender diverse and non-binary folks in the municipality. So we mentioned that here today just to ground us in that very tangible element of what it means to be treaty people. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So Caroline did a brief introduction of our team members who sit on the working group for the Women and Gender Equity Strategy, but we wanted to just give a couple moments here for Bailey and Kathy to tell us a little bit about themselves, their position, and their work with the strategy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bailey Brown. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the Research and Policy Intern in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And I have been working on the Women and Gender Equity strategy along with Caroline and Amy and Kathy for the past while now.
Great, thanks. We're gonna have some feedback, but we'll get it under control. We're side by side, and that's always fun. My name's Kathy Collett, and I'm a research and development specialist with the Human Resources Organizational Development team. I'm also working with this amazing group of people on the gender and equity strategy. And I'm so happy to be here today. I actually started my municipal career in the clerk's office 7 years ago as a legislative assistant, and it's a lot of fun to be back at a meeting. I'm not clerking, but I do have to take minutes today for our part. So it's really nostalgic for me, and thank you for having me. Oh, sorry, and my pronouns are she and her.
And with that, if you could go to the next slide, and I think Kathy, you're going to be introducing the agenda.
Wonderful. Yeah, we're going to just go very briefly over what we hope to accomplish today. So you've met our work group who's doing the work from the business, providing business unit perspectives and support for the strategy development. We want to talk to you a little bit about what the strategy is, some of the key language that we use in our work, and what our engagement process is. So what the timeline is and what we're doing to engage committees like yourself, as well as residents and internal HRM staff. And we also want to provide a very brief overview of the services that the municipality provides, just so that we can be grounded before we get into our discussion questions that we actually sent to you a little while ago. We have 3 questions we want to explore, and then we have space for an open conversation, questions, comments you might have, and then we'll close out with next steps. Next slide, please.
So to provide a short introduction about what the Women and Gender Equity Strategy is, or what we hope it to be. So when the process is complete, this will be a guiding document that will help Halifax Regional Municipality to advance gender equality in the region. So this strategy will look both inwards in the organization, HRM as an organization, and also outwards, HRM as a community and a municipality. So really, we're hoping that the strategy will provide guidance on how to reduce barriers to inclusive municipal services that may be experienced by a diversity of people and communities in the municipality based on parts of identity such as gender expression, race, ability, immigration status, age, language, income, and much more. So that is one of the key principles that is at the heart of the strategy, is the concept of intersectionality. So looking at the ways that those different parts of our identities overlap and intersect, and how that impacts the way that we experience the municipality, both services and the communities that we live in within the municipality. And could you go to the next slide, please?
So we also wanted to tell you a little bit about some of our guiding principles. Amy spoke to reconciliation earlier. It's an important guiding principle for us, and we're taking it to reconciliation. We want to be working with our Indigenous partners to move reconciliation forward, and this is an important part of our work. And we've already begun collaborating with our Indigenous partners in the first phase of engagement, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Other guiding principles that are important to our work are collaboration. We know that we can't do this work without community. It's for and with community. And as Amy also mentioned, intersectionality is a core principle or value. And we're using practices from Gender-Based Analysis Plus to embed intersectionality into our work. And of course, accessibility is, it's woven throughout. the GBA Plus process, but I think it is important to explicitly name that accessibility is important to us. It's something that we're doing in our engagement process. We want to make sure that people are able to come and participate and be involved. And we know that there are some barriers related to accessibility that we're seeking to remove as part of the process. So those are some of our guiding principles for the work. Did I miss anything, my group members?
Oh, I think you covered it all there, Caroline.
Okay, great. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I'll hand it over to Bailey.
Fantastic. So like Caroline said, we have been working in collaboration with community and doing various engagements in community circles. In doing that, we found that the best way to contact communities is to talk to people in the communities and people who serve those communities. So we have various community partners that we have been working with, such as the YMCA for the Greater Halifax and Dartmouth area, the Center for Immigrant Programs, the Youth Project, which serves the 2S LGBTQ community, especially 2S LGBTQ youth within Halifax, ISANS, which serves newcomers and immigrants to Canada, the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association, servicing and representing Indigenous women in Nova Scotia, the Just Food Action Plan for the Halifax region and the Halifax Food Policy Alliance, the Nova Scotia League for Equal Opportunities, helping us connect with the disability community and those with disabilities, and Femme Action Halifax, which helps us connect with the Francophonie and Acadian communities. And I don't think I've missed anything. Next slide. I can hand back to Kathy.
So this is just giving you a little bit of, a sense of where we are in the process and where we're heading. I think we lost our slide. Back to the arrow, please, when you get a chance. Thank you. Oh, okay, there we go. We found it. So we started actually in September 2021, and at this point, we were just doing our information gathering, scanning both internal and external, and planning our our process to make sure that we were engaging those who we really needed to reach out to have those voices here. So sometimes we need to take really really intentional steps to make sure that we are reaching out to have those conversations with our community partners. So from October onwards, that's exactly what we've been doing. And we've been having some pretty incredible engagement sessions with community partners. Here we are now. You'll see that we are here, arrow. So January until this coming summer, we're doing public engagement with residents, with diverse communities throughout Halifax Regional Municipality. And there's also a variety of ways to participate that include online and in person. We got a little slowed down with the in person due to the public health measures that are constantly changing, but we have managed to do several in-person engagement sessions, and those are something we're continuing with. And then so summer 2022 and beyond, this is when we will be making sure all those voices are reflected in the report and in the strategy itself. This will then go to council and continue as a tool and as a resource for the municipality.
Yeah, and if I could add one thing, Kathy, I think we are hoping to engage with the Women's Advisory Committee multiple times throughout this process. So we haven't put all of the arrows where we'd like your input and feedback, but I anticipate that we'll be coming with, what we've developed and questions for you on a couple of occasions, similar to the way that the Public Safety Office has engaged with the members around the development of the UN Women's Safe Cities program and the scoping study. We'd like to just continue, have an open dialogue and continue gathering your feedback and your input. And I think we consider this kind of something that, we're doing continuously, and we keep trying things and then seeing how it goes and then adding in feedback. So essentially this is just to say we would like to be on your agenda more often. So, and if you'll have us. Next slide, please.
So these are terms that you folks are likely very familiar with in terms of the work that you're doing here on this committee, but we wanted to mention them just to, again, ground us in this conversation today of what we mean when we're using these terms in the engagement. So gender equality refers to the equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of women, gender diverse, and non-binary people, men, and everyone along the gender spectrum. Gender equity is the process or practice that will help us achieve gender equality. And equity means giving everyone what they need to succeed. If you could go to the next slide, please. So when we say sex, we're referring to a person's biological and physiological characteristics. An individual's sex is most often designated by a medical assessment at the moment of birth. This can also be referred to as birth assigned sex. So examples would be female, male, intersex. Gender refers to the roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society or culture may construct or consider appropriate for people who identify as men, non-binary, two-spirit, or women. And of course, it can result in stereotyping and limited expectations about what people can and cannot do. And if you could go to the next slide, please. And I believe I am passing this off to Kathy.
Great, thanks, Amy. When we do these engagements and these strategies, we're not always talking to someone who is familiar with all of the municipal services that we provide. And so while we certainly have never been shutting down conversations when, things that we've heard touch on other levels of government or other, other service providers, we always like to do an overview of municipal services just to try and focus the conversation around the services that we have, some control over at the municipality. So home and property, of course, transportation, our fire and police, and business, parks and rec, city hall, and we have a multilingual 311. So whenever possible, when we're doing these sessions, we do try and kind of guide conversation back to the elements that the municipality provides services for. But as we know, many of these services interact with services from other levels of government, community groups, and other non-for-profits. So we're not shutting down any of the information we're receiving, and certainly it enriches what we hear by having a wide scope of what is being shared with us.
Wonderful. So now, unless there are any questions, we want to spend the rest of our time together having a conversation with you, with the committee. We have 3 questions that are on our mind as we develop the strategy. And these are questions that we're asking residents and our community partners. So we want to spend the remaining time together with these questions, and we would like to use the format that the chair typically uses, which is kind of going around and ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to participate. So I know that sometimes our screens move a little bit, so I think we'll go off of a list that the clerk's office has provided, and we'll call out your name. Does that work for everyone? As we ask the questions, we'll invite you to participate and share your feedback in that format. Does that work? I'm seeing a few thumbs up. Yeah. Madam Chair, does that work for you?
Yes, I think that's good, Caroline.
Okay, great. And if we miss anyone, please make sure to let us know. Just sometimes because the screen moves around and maybe our list is not up to date, just make sure if you haven't been called upon, we'd really love to hear from you. We don't want this digital thing to be a barrier to participation. So I'm going to hand it over to Bailey, who's going to kick us off with our first question for discussion. Over to you, Bailey.
Perfect. And we can move to the next slide. Awesome. So during this conversation, we want to hear what you think HRM can do to better serve women in goals. So to start, we just sort of want to talk about visioning. So in a perfect HRM, if HRM were perfect and we've already achieved gender equality for women, gender and gender diverse people, what would that sort of look like in your head? So like, would it have parks that are more accessible? Would you see yourself more within positions of power within the municipality, stuff like that. So as Madam Chair was going over the people earlier, I did write it down in alphabetical order, so I might just start in the similar way. So I can start with Haneen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. I think for this first one, the way that I've sort of laid out my answers are threefold for each one. So if that's okay, I'll just go forward with it. Where for when I imagine a city that has achieved gender equality, for me, it looks like equal representation at various levels of governance, which is, in municipal, within this level of governance in terms of seeing different positions having people that look like me, and people, and gender diverse individuals, as well as correction of gender pay inequity. So that is, more transparency within special governance. And then finally, redressing of the gender-based violence, both domestically and out of the home, and creating a safe space for people to come forward. So those are the things that I imagine, at least in a city that has achieved gender equality.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So next we can move to Councillor Blackburn.
Hi there, thank you. So yeah, when I first saw this, the first thing that jumped to my mind was a city with opportunities for equal success, recognizing it looks different for different folks.
Perfect, thank you. Next on my list, I have Holly Gillis here.
Thank you for the presentation, and it's nice to have some time to dive into this. I think for me, one of the things I'd notice would be less differences between genders. So if we had some gender equality, there would be less difference for genders. And thinking as a mom of two 11-year-old girls, that there would be more opportunities for them. And for people that are coming, down, still growing and developing, and going to be running our cities, hopefully, and our communities in the years ahead. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Holly. Next, I will move to Councillor Stoddard.
Councillor, you're muted.
Oh.
I can't remember what I said, so I have to pass on. No. In a city such as Halifax, I'd like to see equal representation, whether it's binary, female, male, young, old, everybody should have a right to be represented. And sometimes what I need as a service is not what you need as a service. So I may be able to go upstairs and get on an elevator or whatever the case may be, but you may not be able to. I may be able to see different people in a grocery store. They might be familiar to my ethnic background, but they may not be familiar to yours. So in some ways, I might feel more comfortable than you. But in our city, I think we're getting there. A lot more work has to be done. And I think we'll get to the point where, I'd like to see us get to the point where everybody has their needs and they don't have to. They'll be safe with what they decide is whatever they decide their packages, that they'll be able to run with it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Councillor. I will move on to Christine now.
Yeah, so when I think about this topic, I really echo Haneen's comment earlier. I want to see someone else like me on the, have a voice, have a decision power. So when we talk about gender equality, it's not only half men, half women. Like we need to consider other number and people, and also looking through intersectionality lens, like the racialized people, how many racialized women they are having a seat on the table. So that's my imagination of gender equality.
Thank you so much, Christine. And finally, I will go to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, oh yes. So I had several ideas, so I'm going to give them all to you. I mean, I certainly echo everybody's views on representation. I agree completely with what Christine said, that, you know, when we all look at a board or a committee or people that work for the city, we should, from time to time, not all the time, but from time to time, at least see somebody that looks like us. We should not feel that we're excluded from that. A city that has achieved gender equality would be safe for everybody. Doesn't matter what your gender or what your, you know, whether you're gender diverse, binary, whatever we are, we should feel safe in our public spaces. We should feel safe in housing. We should feel safe when we're using transportation. So we need to feel safe. We also need to have access. We should be able to access the services that the city provides. If the city provides them, but we as a whatever our gender is, are unable to access those services for whatever reasons, systemic reasons or so on, there will be no equality. We've heard over and over again, I don't really understand why your slide said we shouldn't be talking about housing, because the HRM has a tremendous impact on housing. And when we think about the, you know, the money that's given to agreements made with developers with regard to housing. So I think women need to have gender equality. All people need to have adequate, appropriate, and affordable housing. Doesn't matter who you are. The housing should be adequate. It should be appropriate to your needs, and it should be affordable. And just one other little thing that I don't know that it has to do with the city, but it does have to do a little bit with the media within a city. I would love to see media, or when I'm thinking of more old-fashioned traditional media like newspapers, television, and so on, that focus as much on women and women's success as it does on males and their success. And you think of sports or business or anything, it seems to me we're a little bit underrepresented there with our achievements.
It's true.
A little bit more than what you bargained for there, Bailey, but.
Oh, no, thank you so much. Caroline, do you feel like, well, I would just like to open the floor to if anyone has anything else that they would like to add to this.
Bailey, I'd like to just maybe speak to Jane's comment and also maybe invite councillors to speak to this too around the housing piece. I think we wanted to ground ourselves in what's within our mandate as a municipality so that we can have a really productive conversation. And we're trying to be mindful and looking at like the municipal charter and make sure that when we're having a conversation, we're orienting ourselves to the services that we provide. For example, fire and emergency, police, you know, transportation and things like that, so that when we develop the strategy, we can take it to council and it's something that, you know, they are able to, you know, not necessarily say yes to. There may be conversation and dialogue, but that it really is well aligned with the mandate of the municipality. So there may be an opportunity to explore things that are within the mandate of HRM specific to housing, but I'm definitely not an expert in that area. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we certainly welcome conversation around things that are not within the mandate, but we recognize that we can't move things forward that are outside of scope for us. So if it falls within the municipality's mandate around housing, I know that there are a very small select number of things that the municipality does with regards to housing. Certainly we could include that into the strategy, but I would definitely defer to the expertise of people who work on the housing file and the councillors as well, who are much more well versed in those topics than myself. So I'd open it up to Councillor Stoddart or Blackburn to speak to how we would frame housing and gender equity in the conversation.
Yeah, that's a tough one. We spent a lot of time on Tuesday talking about that one. Yeah, I mean the mandate, and it's so funny that we're having this conversation right here, right now, because at council on Tuesday, I had props. I channeled my inner who is it, Katie Porter down in the States, because it is something that frustrates us to no end. We once upon a time did look after, HRM did look after housing, affordable housing, housing support, and that was removed from us at amalgamation in 1996. And so the province has been the lead agency responsible for that since then. It's certainly an area that hasn't received the funding that it is that is needed and it deserves over the years, and we're seeing the results of that now with the number of people sleeping rough in HRM. So just to be clear, we do not build affordable housing. We certainly direct monies to groups, nonprofit groups that do that kind of work. Same with the emergency shelter beds. We do not run emergency shelters. We do not have the expertise to do that type of work. So again, we direct monies to the nonprofits that are the best. They're really the best to do that work because they that's their area of expertise. So we direct monies to groups like the YMCA, like Adsum House. And then, of course, this past year, we've sort of stepped outside our normal boundaries and taken on the modular projects to take some of the pressure off the shelter system as it continues to struggle. But we don't run those modulars that have been set up in Halifax and Dartmouth. Once they are built and in place, they're hooked up with water and power, and they're given an occupancy permit. From there, we hand the keys over to service providers from the province. So, and they're the ones that take the lead in populating those units and providing the wraparound services that the residents of those modular units need. So hopefully that clears up a little bit, what we do as far as the housing the housing file is concerned. Thank you.
Carolyn, could I just say something further to that?
Of course, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it would be fair to say that the HRM has an impact on housing for women indirectly by through its funding of these various organizations, and through maybe financing sort of the capital, as you said, those modular units, and then handing off. So all my point would be is that the HRM does have a role. It's not direct, but it does have a role in providing housing. And to the extent that it has a role, I would like to reiterate that they should do what the HRM needs to do, whatever it can to make sure that all genders are adequately and appropriately served through those policies.
And and point taken. I certainly, I think that when we do direct money to those agencies, taking a gendered lens to make sure that that when that money is, those grants are given to nonprofits that deal with emergency beds, that we make sure that that women will have space, that Adsum House is at the table, and that that the YMCA makes sure that that the Indigenous voice is heard, or the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center makes sure. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We are the support for the major provincial the major provincial programs that provide housing. Absolutely.
It is a provincial mandate, and the province does cover housing. However, it is an HRM right now, and we decided we would put some money and effort into it because something had to be done. So that's why HRM put out some funds and did what they could with the modulars to make sure that they're ready. There are bedrooms and there's shared kitchen and all of that thing to make them comfortable and, have a long-term place to stay for now, we didn't build hundreds, but, we took a good chunk out of it. And the other thing I was going to say is, oh gosh, I lose my train of thought. Just thinking about, a situation like that, you'd have to make sure that if you're gender-based or however you might self-identify, that they have room for you as well. And also as women, girls, or identifying as a woman or a girl, they have to have space for you. And I find more susceptible women and girls, like say a family with landlords and things coming around that they're selling their houses and they evict the people that are in the house renting, and then they have nowhere to go. So you're seeing more and more families now needing housing. It's not individuals anymore, and the majority of the head of the family is the woman. So, here she is without a home, 2 kids, and it's nothing she did. And they can say it's sometimes you're homeless and somebody said, well, you did something or whatever. But these are actual situations that it was because of a landlord, a good portion, he had a good idea, good offer on his house. So said, well, I give you 3 months notice and you have to leave. So there are a lot of tough and interesting situations out there and reasons for why people are homeless.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I think I may be echoing on yours there, Caroline.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, no problem. So yes, thank you so much everyone for your input on that question. I think we can move now to our second question for you folks, which is moving vision to action. I will just say, based on listening to the conversation there and thinking through our process, I think that we can take that as a learning in terms of how we frame some of these questions, because I will say, and I'm sure that my working group members would echo this, that housing has come up in conversation with many community partners as well. And there are other areas, of course, that the municipality does do work in that don't necessarily fall within these categories that we mentioned before. I think public safety would be one of the ones that really kind of touches on a lot of the different services and resources that the municipality provides. So just to say, when you're thinking about answering this question, don't necessarily think about limiting yourself per se in terms of what is and what isn't covered by the municipality, but that is something that we've been framing the conversation with, just so that there's a sense of accountability there for us as well. If we start having a conversation about the education system, it's not really a system that we have direct power over. We can have conversations about education because, education doesn't only happen in schools, it happens in rec centers, it happens in informal community partnerships, but we want to make sure that we have a realistic conversation with folks. So just to say, when we enter into this question here, feel free to share whatever you think is most important to share with us. So the question is, what resources, services, or supports can the municipality provide to help make this vision a reality? Example would be a lower cost recreation program specifically for women and girls, but there's many other examples. I will attempt to to reverse our list here, as you do usually, Chair. Jane, would you still like to be the last one to comment, or would you like to go first? You'd like to be the last. Okay. So we'll start off with Christine, if that's okay.
Oh, sorry, I probably need more time to think about this question.
Yeah, no problem at all, Christine. Councillor Stoddard, would you feel prepared to hop in on this one? Oh, I think you're still muted there, Councillor Stoddard.
I do this all day sometimes. I was just wondering if you could repeat your question a little more. I was writing down a few things, but I'm not sure where I should be.
Yeah, no problem. And it's also on the screen here for you as well, Councillor Stoddard, if you need to take another look. But what resources, services, or supports can the municipality provide to help make this vision a reality? So the vision that you spoke about before, that other members of the committee spoke about.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking through the slideshow to see. So I looked at this before and I didn't see questions. Is it on the actual slideshow? The flip chart? I'm not seeing anything.
Iona, can you not see the slide on your screen?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Oh, thank you very much, Caroline.
Stoddard, I just put the question in the chat box, if you can see the chat box in there.
Would you like me to come back around to you again, Councillor Stoddard? Is that, yeah?
Please.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry to put you on the spot there. Okay, so I think next we would have Holly, if Holly's prepared.
I'm also still jotting down a few things too. I think it's a really, I mean, it's an important question, and it's also a fully, that's my dog crying, apologies. It's a very comprehensive question. It's everything from, my head goes to the system barriers, to the determinants of health, to what we know are causing challenges for folks. So I'm going to put think about it and put a few thoughts in the chat too as I think about it. It's probably one we have to come back to a couple of times as a bit of a lens. I think starting to talk about it is an important piece too. So.
Yeah, for sure, Holly, that sounds good. We can definitely circle back. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much. So yeah, a few things that that come to mind when I think about this is, even something as simple as when you schedule meetings. We just heard Councillor Stoddard discuss when she was, working and on the Heritage Advisory Committee, that meetings that started at 4 o'clock didn't always work with her schedule because it was hard to get off work, or childcare issues or whatever, to things like special recruitment programs for women or those who identify as women, to get them into the non-traditional jobs. Certainly thinking about our service providers like fire and police, certainly nowhere near parity, and looking into is it something that is achievable, parity in those roles, and if so, how do you make that happen? And the other thing that comes to mind too is when designing public spaces. My heavens, we need more women in the architecture industry, that's for sure. Open spaces that are welcoming and supportive for women and people who identify as women, whether it's lighting or lower walls that people can see over when they're outside, so they know their surroundings at all times. Those are things that make women feel welcome and safe. And so those are just sort of the first things that come to mind for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Blackburn. And then we come to Haneen.
Thank you very much. So I think I had a few thoughts about this. Sort of the first thing that I thought about was mentorship programs. I know that I've benefited a lot from that, especially in terms of having, women mentor me in my sort of own career and stuff. I don't think I would have gone anywhere that I've gone without my mentors. And I think especially within the municipal level, having to be able to, having that kind of program and at least advertising it in that way, I think it would be able to just sort of highlight the career progression opportunities that people have, and that gender diverse individuals and women alike can actually take a certain role as they watch somebody else take that. So sort of something of that sort is an idea that I had. And similar to Councillor Blackburn, deconstructing the career stereotypes by working with students and young people. I know you mentioned earlier that education is something that's not necessarily within the purview of the municipality, but engaging with young students, with young individuals, and sort of getting them thinking about what they can take on, and possibly even introducing mentorship at that age. As well, similar to what Councillor Blackburn had mentioned, implementing flexible, full-time work, especially mothers and women and gender diverse individuals and just humans all around need some flexibility. And so being able to just sort of work around that without the stereotype that comes along with that would be wonderful, especially at the municipality level, because it is emulated. Eventually, sort of, if the municipality does it, then other professions tend to follow along eventually. And then what I mentioned earlier as well, I know that there is, full transparency of salaries that are above 100,000. But in terms of a comparative report between women and men within the municipality, I'm not sure if that's something that currently exists. To be honest, I didn't look into it too deeply. So perhaps if that doesn't exist, that's something to consider. And those are the thoughts that I sort of just jotted down as I was looking over the questions when you sent out that email.
Thank you so much, Haneen. So now we'll go to Jane, if you'd like to.
Sorry, you might want to just go back to Councillor Stoddard and Christine in case they had some thoughts.
I was trying to buy them some time, but I will. Yes, let's go.
If they don't want to talk, I've got some ideas, but I just wanted to make sure they had time.
Did you want to jump in, Christine or Councillor Stoddard?
Sure. Yeah. So about my careers of vision, I'm thinking like there's two areas. First one, like for women, especially racialized women, to have a seat on the table and have an equal voice. For example, from the municipal levels, like engagement, I'm thinking about election, like how do we engage more women from like a more diverse background to be engaged, to learn about municipal election, to considering running, like what kind of resource, like is there a camping school, is there something else? Because I know camping school only run like every 4 years or 2 years. So and to run in an election, sometimes you need a lot of courage, connections, and for women from more like a diverse background, sometimes they don't have that kind of connection. So what kind of resource city municipal can provide? Another one is about, maybe I digress a little bit, but it's about population. So like for the city of Halifax, we have a goal to reach 500,000 population by 2027. So once we get more people, and like many of them will be women, so how do we adapt our service to help these newcomers to live and work and find minimum activity? I feel there should be more service to adding more resource to support and to find the right channel to adapt a new life in Halifax as the city is growing. Thank you.
I had, oops, oh, I'm open this time. My thoughts went to gender parity as man and woman, and not, I'm trying to say, just based on a man and a woman interaction, or just as they identify as men and women. And I was thinking, you know, this is the first time Halifax HRM has ever had gender parity in their council. And I was thinking, what a wonderful thing that was. And of course, our returning expert woman council is Councillor Blackburn. You know, it's a good thing we are in, well, we're back in lockdown at our houses, but it's kind of fortunate, because I'm sure I'd be at our door every minute. How do I do this? How do I do this? But all that aside, I did agree that mentors and support are very important. For myself, I talked and listened to existing counselors when I was campaigning. I also talked to former counselors to find out, you know, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they could change. And one thing we did in council, which I was really pleased to see, was the day, Lisa, that the young women in leadership. I thought that was awesome. She had a group of students from, where were they from? I can't even remember now.
I think they were from Prince Andrew.
Yes.
Yep.
You know,
soon to be renamed Prince Andrew High.
Yes. You know, and they came in as a group and sat, and we had different speakers, and you know, they got to ask questions, and it was really nice to be able to see women in power, and they get to speak to them, what the challenges was, what the benefits were. So I thought that was a wonderful idea. That's all. That's all for now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddard. And I should check in also with Holly. Holly, did you want to jump in there?
I think thank you, and echoing a lot of what's been said. I think one of the things that came to mind for me when I was watching regional council on Tuesday night that might benefit this response too is really looking back at, you know, past ideas and thoughts and submissions. There's probably some responses to this question from some other work that's been done, and oftentimes I think we can gain strength by, you know, reusing some of those engagement and that feedback that citizens and collaborations have shared with us. I mean, lots of ideas from infrastructure to policies, or how do we make our approaches, you know, our family policies, our rec policies a little bit more balanced to support that vision. And I think, you know, the work that this strategy and this committee is doing around trying to integrate that gender perspective into decision making will also help. So less about specific resources, service, and supports, and more about just being mindful. We've probably heard a lot of ideas through channels over the years, and how can we pull those forward to make those part of the reality? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly. And Jane, if you'd like to jump in.
Yeah, so speaking of bringing ideas forward that we've heard before, that's exactly where my ideas came from our previous meetings. One of them is that the city needs to continue to collect data so that they know where the inequalities exist. And I really applaud the fact that the diversity and inclusion people, you know, changed the committee application this year to let people self-identify. So that's a step in the right direction. We're going to get some data. We need to do more of that. A program we heard about on this committee is the one in London that helps address the issue of trafficking. And I think that's a program that our city should look very closely at to consider replicating. And another thing we heard, and this we heard from the YMCA, or the Home for Good project, where women are particularly vulnerable to male landlords and their some of their activities. And at that time, there was discussion about a registry for landlords and landlord training, and that's a service that I think the HRM could and should engage in.
Thank you so much, Jane. Really appreciate it. And are there any other final thoughts on this question before we move to the next? Okay, with that, if you could change the slide, please. And I will pass this on to Caroline.
Thanks, Amy. I'm just going to ask the clerk how we're doing for time.
We have 20 minutes left in our
meeting. Yeah, could I just speak to that, Caroline?
Yes, please.
I'm getting an echo. I don't know why. Let me
Amy, do you have your mic open, or I'll close my mic.
Are you can you hear me? No, can't hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, you can. Sorry, I'm sorry. So my suggestion was, Caroline, could we come back to this question at the next meeting? Because we've all heard a lot of ideas, and it might be hard for us to figure out, well, what is our three top ones? So that would give us a little bit of time. We could have some notes on what the suggestions and ideas were, and that might help us formulate our priorities. Certainly we could allow time at the next meeting to consider this question if you're agreeable.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful idea. It will give folks an opportunity to reflect on the conversation today, perhaps some priorities that you've already identified in your work plan or through other presentations. And I think, inviting multiple ways to participate. I know that there are members of the committee who are not here today, so multiple opportunities and multiple formats. So we would be happy to bring this question back to the next meeting, but also to accept any written submissions, either from the committee as a whole, or whatever other processes for written submissions that are available to us through our terms of reference and the clerk's office. So my email, I will share that with you in the next slide or two, but we're definitely open to multiple ways of providing feedback. So yeah.
So perhaps, Caroline, you could communicate with us what the ideas are, absolutely, and then how to feed them back to you.
Yes, we will definitely do that. We'll work together with the group and we will send that to the committee. Can we go to the next slide, please?
So I think it's great that we're going to be able to have more time to reflect on that last question, because it is a big one and an important one. But knowing that there'll be another opportunity to respond to that one, is there any other reflections, questions, comments that you'd like to share in this space today about the discussion we've been having this past 45 minutes, or will we pick this up at another time? And that's to anybody. And absolutely, we appreciated the feedback on how we presented some of the questions. So certainly, if after you reflect on this conversation today, if you have any other thoughts on how we've presented some of the slides or some of the information, or even how we've asked some of the questions, really, we are open to feedback on anything. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts and communicating with you further on this as the process continues.
Yeah, well said, Kathy. I I just wanted to mention that as we collect information as part of the engagement process, one of our next steps is to develop a what we heard report, and that's something that we are committed to bringing back to the committee. So even after next meeting, beyond that, we'll be bringing that back to the committee, as well as be sharing that with our residents publicly on halifax.ca. So we just want to make sure that we're committed to continuing to communicate with you about how we move along in this process, and I will put my email address in the chat box there for you to provide any written submissions that you might like to send to us. So we're just really grateful for the opportunity to be here. We're also grateful for the extra few minutes that we've taken, and we're going to see you again soon. So thank you. We look forward to coming back next time.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, and your team. You're doing great, important work, and we appreciate the opportunity to be heard and to have some input. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you and continuing this discussion next meeting. So now we'll move on to Councillor Blackburn, who is going to give us a kind of an overview of the HRM budget from a gender perspective.
Yes, and I will keep this very quick, noticing the time and realizing that I actually have another meeting that starts at 6 o'clock. So, oh, Katie, thank you. Awesome. So just a quick slideshow, and we can go to the first slide, please, or the next slide, please, I should say. All right, so on April 12th, after many months of blood, sweat, and tears, as Iona can attest to, we passed a $1.1 billion budget, and included in that is 180 million and change that we actually collect for the province for mandatory provincial contributions, things like education funding, for example. And has been pointed out, our population is on the move. Right now, we have 465,000 residents, give or take, and we're expecting that to go to 500,000. Originally, the thought was we would do that by 2030, but we're probably going to hit that goal a little bit sooner than that. And 47% of the population is within the municipality. Well, I should say 47% of the population of Nova Scotia is in the municipality, as well as 52% of the provincial GDP. Next slide, please. And so, as we've been discussing about the municipal programs and services, for the most part, they are non-biased. Parks are for anybody and anyone, and it's sort of difficult to quantify how they benefit women specifically, but as we've been discussing, they certainly can be designed in such a way that they offer a welcome and safe space for women. Of course, as has been pointed out in the gender equity strategy survey that we just heard about and participated in, we're working. This is really a key thing that we're doing here at HRM to ensure access to all persons to all programs and services. Next slide, please. And just, quickly, some of the programs and services that we have to budget for. Things like libraries, transit, parks and playgrounds, all the rec services. We look after traffic services, parking, traffic light signal, signage, that sort of thing, and road work as well. It should be noted that when it comes to roads, we do have a bit of a hybrid here, because in the more rural areas of the municipality, the province actually is responsible for the road work, and we look after that with a service agreement with the province. Next slide, please. A quick overview of the budget for this year. We made significant investment in capital projects this year, with 318 or almost $319 million invested in capital projects. We've learned that capital has been underfunded quite a bit in the last decade or so, and this is an effort to sort of play catch up a little bit. Again, that speaks to the when we're talking about infrastructure, roads, bridges, sidewalks, that sort of thing. And those do play a role in the safety of women in our municipality. Also, of course, one of the big things was the $10 million that has been earmarked for Halifax, and included in the budget this year was a little over $63 million for the electric buses. That is a project that is going to play out over several years, because it's more than just buying the buses. We have to build a whole new a building to hold them so we can have a place to charge them at night. It's not something that you can just retrofit an old building with. So that does come with a bit of a challenge. The investment in Halifax is quite important, because as we have discussed at this table, usually poverty affects women more than men, and women are usually the first to feel that the poverty. And certainly with the climate change in full force, we're seeing that it's women that are suffering the most when it comes to the results of climate action or climate change, and what is happening to our climate as a result. Next slide, please. So one of the big things that we started a couple of years ago that we committed to is the free menstrual products at HRM facilities, as public libraries or rec centers. It started out with our HRM-owned rec centers, and then we were able to get our partner centers, because we have a lot of recreation centers in HRM that the building itself is owned by the municipality, but the building is run by usually a volunteer board of directors, and they're responsible for their own fundraising and budgeting. So we were able to work with them to make sure that the free menstrual products would be available in all the HRM centers. That certainly is part of the commitment to the Building Poverty Solutions report that we did with the United Way Halifax several years ago. And that was something that was pointed out in that report. That was a suggestion that came from that and from those conversations. Again, since women disproportionately often in the lower income brackets, the affordable access programs that we offer were great help to women with providing recreation services at a partial price or free in some cases. Also for children and youth in financial need. Also our affordable transit pass program that allows women to get a 50% off our adult pass. And there are also property tax exemptions and deferrals programs in place there that can help women who are experiencing poverty. Next slide, please. So this is sort of a breakdown to our property tax exemption and deferral program. I'm not going to go deep into those numbers, but something we did do this year with this budget is raise the threshold of household income that makes these programs available, so that it's no longer just if you make under $26,000 a year, you qualify for this. It's a little more nuanced. It's a little more spread out, and it also takes into account how many people live in a household as well. So we've been able to, it's a little more complex than just having one cutoff point for our property tax exemption and deferral programs. But we feel that a program like this sort of spreads it out more, and we're able to reach more people in need, because it recognizes that sort of working poverty is a real challenge in HRM. So we want to make sure that we reach those folks that are working full time and barely scraping by, and they make what looks like on paper a good living wage, but it really is a challenge with all the economic pressures. So one of the things, like I said, that we did do this year was raise the income threshold for who qualifies for some of these tax exemption programs. Next slide, please. And here's, yeah, this is a bit more detail on our recreation access program and what the low income cutoff is for that. For this program, we actually use Revenue Canada's low income cutoff. This is what Revenue Canada said in 2020 is, what qualifies as low income, and we've sort of beefed it up a bit with allowing for the access, the recreation programs to be accessible by people making significantly more than what one would consider low income. But we put it in perspective by saying, hey, listen, a family of 5 living on $97,000 a year, that's that can be a bit tight, and so they would qualify for a discount of 50%. So you can see there that we try to capture as many people as possible with our access programs. Next slide, please. And so, of course, at the start of every budget cycle, we kind of sit down and look at our strategic priorities. We set them as a council at the beginning of each term. So when, for example, when Iona was elected back in 2020 as a council, we sat down and plotted out what our strategic priorities were and our vision. So that was something that's done every 4 years to make sure that we stay on track, and we make sure that the administrative area of things is aligned with the council priority. Next slide, please. And so it does get a bit complicated when you read in the media that the tax rate is going up or going down. What does that mean? And so for budget purposes, what we like to focus on is not the rate itself, but what the final tax bill is. That's really what people understand the most. When they get that bill in the mail in the fall and in the spring, how much am I going to pay? And, in fact, even though people's final tax bill will go up, the actual tax rate this year went down. And of course, there are other factors that go into, how much your tax bill is going to be. One of the big things that we really have no control over is assessments. And of course, we all know that housing, prices have jumped dramatically in the last several years, and so that is something that that will play into what the final tax bill is. And just a bit more context when it comes to assessments, it's actually Property Valuation Services Nova Scotia that determines what the value of someone's home is. That is, it's sort of a, it's not really, it's not a, it's sort of, it's not part of the province, but it is at arm's length from the province. So it is it's sort of an independent nonprofit that works with the province to determine what the assessments will be each year. And so that does, definitely pays or it definitely plays a role in what the final tax bill is going to be. And we are cognizant of that when we go into the tax or to go into budget season every year. Next slide, please. And just a little, hit here on the tax rate for 22-23. So yeah, as you can see, under residential, the urban tax rate went from 0.813 in 21-22 to 0.794 in 22-23. So that's what I mean when I say the actual tax rate went down. But the average tax bill is likely to go up in large part because of the assessments, which you can see under residential for sure have jumped quite a bit on average just in the 1 year. Good news is that our debt is down 1.4%, and it has been actually it's been consistently going down since 1999. So that is something that we're really pleased to see happen, because that's that's a bill that we don't want to leave our grandkids for sure. Next slide, please. So as you saw on the previous slide, 4.6% was the final total that we settled on as an increase for this year. 3% of that was the climate action tax. That was to support Halifax, which is our climate action roadmap, basically, that sets out our long-term climate action plan. And as a council, we decided it was all well and good to have this beautiful Halifax plan, which has been really heralded across Canada as one of the better ones that has been developed over the last 10 years. And, that was something that we just didn't want to see sit on a shelf. So we we put on our big girl pants and decided that, a 3% Halifax climate action tax was necessary to get this work started. It's important work that needs to be done. Our climate action office says we've got about 5 to 7 years to get a lot of these programs underway if we're going to make any impact at all. Next slide, please. And of course, prosperous economy is always something that is of importance to us. And these are some of the big things that we've got, on the go right now. One of the bigger ones is the African Nova Scotian Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan, which was passed late last year. And, there's a lot of good in that plan that will help women of diverse backgrounds, especially women who are seeking to start their own businesses and get into the economy in Halifax. So I certainly point that out as something that we're very pleased to see moving forward. Another thing too is the Cogswell District project, and don't know if you've had an opportunity to go online and see what is planned for that, but certainly as we're ripping down all those old overpasses downtown, what is envisioned there is going to be a game changer for the city and completely change the skyline of that area of Halifax. And I am pleased to say that certainly a lot of the work that was done in the planning of that was done with a lens to women and equity. So have a look at that if you have an opportunity, because a lot of what they have planned aligns with many of the discussions that we've had here at this table. Next slide, please. Communities, that of course is huge when we look at that from a women and gender lens. We've the Safe City, Safe Public Spaces program was part of the budget this year. Certainly my role with the Board of Police Commissioners, they are very, very active with the Defund the Police report. And certainly the anti-Black racism strategy is something that is in the budget this year for full funding. Our response to homelessness, we've certainly discussed that earlier in this meeting. And, I guess, what we want to see out of this are safe, involved, inclusive, and affordable communities. And that's really the goal for this budget. And really, that's one of the goals that we've had, or one of the overarching goals we've had for this term on council. Next slide, please. And I think we've had really good discussions about the Safe City and Safe Public Spaces program. Of course, this responds to gender-based violence in public spaces. In the budget is the next phase that involves developing and implementing the recommendations to address those priority areas. And, looking forward to seeing this come online, the implementation of the Women's Safety Assessment tool that I think will certainly help HRM staff going forward in, when we discuss how to design spaces that are safe for women. Next slide, please.
Lisa, I'm just checking. We're just at 6 o'clock, so I'm just wondering how
I think this
more.
is the last slide.
Perfect.
Yep. Oh, yeah, this is something, the gender equity strategy that's coming in the fourth quarter of 22-23. And of course, the gender-based analysis plus that this group was very instrumental in bringing forward to HRM staff. And next slide. All right, so yeah, I'll just skip over this because this is again one of our key things is we want to get engaged, diverse people around our tables, as Ian discussed in our presentation about boards and committees earlier. Some other things that we do have in the budget this year: the diversity and inclusion framework, our accessibility strategy, and equitable access to municipal services. And of course, it's the Office of Diversity and Inclusion that takes the lead on that. Next slide, please. Inclusive committees, we'll skip over that because Ian just discussed that at our presentation. And that is a little. I try to keep it as brief as possible, but yeah, just a quick overview of the budget and the priorities for the next fiscal year.
And you did a great job, Lisa. So I'll just say that if people have questions, maybe we'll put them to you directly, or bring them up at the next meeting.
Absolutely. And with that, I've got to take off for my 6 o'clock. So sorry, folks.
No problem.
Great session. Thank you.
Yeah. Committee members and Iona, I'm wondering if we could postpone Iona's report on council activities till our next meeting. With that, Iona, how do you feel about that? Can't hear you.
It's been a long day.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
Okay with that? All right. So that brings us to the date of our next meeting, which is June 2nd. And just before we leave today, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that Joanne Beely has now left our committee. And I just wanted to acknowledge her publicly for the work that she's done for our committee, and to thank her for her insightful and very helpful involvement. So best wishes to Joanne. And now, and thank you again to the people that participated today. And now may I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Thank you. Christine has moved and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.